Zotac has the dubious distinction of being the first 3090 card that my bots were able to secure. I did not have any early access, and I've been kind of lazy about getting these out because they're still kind of difficult to buy, but they're not as difficult to buy as they once were. So I just wanted to share my thoughts. So this is the 3090, 24 gigs of VRAM, about $1,500 US. So that's what I paid for it from the Zotac store. No scalping or anything like that. You don't need to scalp. You can, if you're, on top of things, you can buy a card at MSRP. And for whatever reason, the Zotac cards seem to be more attainable. I'm not sure if it's because their web store is especially broken, or because when you add things to your cart, it doesn't really add them to your cart, and if you just spam the checkout over and over again, it'll let you buy. But it also has Cloudflare's DDoS protection, so the store that they have is just broken in just the right way that if you're a human being spamming, you can basically get through the checkout. So this is the Trinity. Zotac Gaming Trinity, 24 gig, Ice Storm, Spectre 2.0, Freeze Tech, Firestorm. It's Ampere. It's basically a slightly modified reference design, somewhat modified, okay, more than slightly modified reference design of Ampere, GDDR6X. So this particular one has a backplate on it, which makes it difficult to see the capacitor configuration. Remember capacitor gate? It was kind of a driver issue, kind of a communication issue between AIB partners and NVIDIA. Well, this isn't going to be a normal review. We're going to talk about some things. We're gonna go over some stuff. First off, 3090, it is insanely powerful. It is ridiculous. The benchmarks for this card, which we'll get to, are just utterly amazing, especially over second generation. It's a tremendous product improvement from NVIDIA. It really is. And the pricing, really, it's not completely outrageous. Although I think the 3080 and probably the 3060 Ti are the buys. The 3070, I'm not real sure about. And the 3090, I'm not real sure about. Even though I'm usually on the more VRAM is better bandwagon, I'm not really a fan of how they gimped the drivers. So if you're not in the know, we had the Titan previously. And the Titan was a little bit gaming and a little bit productivity. And the driver for that has certain optimizations for certain commercial software. And that's present for the Titan, but it's no longer present for the 3090. And so a lot of reviewers were really quick to point that out, which is awesome because there was a time in the reviewer space when that wasn't really exactly the possibility. And so a lot of reviewers have really picked up on the whole, Quadro versus not Quadro driver path. And technically Quadro is not even a thing anymore. NVIDIA is trying to move away from that. So the fact that NVIDIA is willing to still play driver shenanigans with these cards, they're really just trying to keep their market as segmented as possible. But this is bad when there's competition because even though, this is an NVIDIA review and these are Team Green cards and I'm genuinely very impressed by these. And there's not really a but there. There's not really a downside for these cards. The pricing is good, the performance is phenomenal, the features are phenomenal. NVIDIA is pushing the envelope. The fly in the ointment though is that we have AMD to thank for the pricing here. If you look at the pricing of the Quadro, it's quite a bit more than the 3090, and so NVIDIA probably feels justified in not opening up that more enhanced driver path for commercial applications. For some applications like video rendering, it seems not to matter too much unless you're using certain commercial plugins, and then it does actually matter because some things use that acceleration. And software people have been able to figure out their own software optimizations to work around some of the driver gimping, but again, this is sort of shenanigans. There's a whole other aspect of that, and that is if you're using software for your day job, you want the driver to have been qualified by the software vendor. And so like NVIDIA will work together really closely with companies like Autodesk, which produce software that is many, many thousands of dollars. There's a lot of people out there that, pull down $150, $200, $300,000 a year as a salary. And so, $5,000 or $10,000 for software licensing is not a big deal. And I have no problem with NVIDIA capitalizing on that. Sounds good. Let's do it. But, the fact that the Titan is a 3090 replacement and they want to go backwards, I don't know. I could rant about that for an hour in another video, but that's all I'm going to say. I feel like that the pricing for the 3080 and the 3090 would have been much more crazy had AMD not produced a 6800 or a 6800 XT. And the crazy thing is, there's not really feature parity between the 6800 and the 6800 XT. They're incredibly well performing cards. You won't be disappointed if you buy them, but RTX features, I mean, NVIDIA is ahead of the game. If you look at pure RTX performance, pure ray tracing performance, AMD's not there yet. They're sort of on their first generation. There's also other features that these cards have that AMD doesn't yet have, things like DLSS, RTX voice, and a lot of really nice value add features that if you're interested in a $1,000 plus graphics card or around $1,000 graphics card or $400 graphics card, you're gonna be interested in those features. So for me, for this review, ultimately, it's how does the Zotac Gaming 3090 stack up to the NVIDIA reference 3090, which by the way, we bought both of these because we say things like, you have AMD to thank for NVIDIA's pricing, which definitely puts us on the naughty list. So apparently, because you know, they can't do, everybody's too busy to even bother returning my emails, which is fine, not a problem, all good. So the beefy 3-slot 3090 with its big fans and its intelligent design, and it's genuinely good, genuinely a very impressive product. The price point is impressive because of the history of pricing in that segment. And that pricing is impressive given the competing products in that segment. Yeah, the rush seems to have been launched. Is that because, you know, they knew something we didn't? I don't know. The first thing that I noticed about this card is the vertical height. So yes, this is a 2.5, 2 3/4 slot card, just like the Founders Edition, but it's got 3 fans. The fans are a smaller diameter. The heatsink is pretty beefy, but there are some questionable design choices with this backplate. One, in order to remove the backplate, you basically have to disassemble the entire card. You have to go and get little tiny screws, nuts actually, that will fit this so that you can actually remount everything, but you remove this plate here. See, the printed circuit board ends here, and then it's just heatsink over here. This fan is effectively a pass-through fan. The third fan is a pass-through fan. It's just like this fan on the Founders Edition, except the design here is really dumb. I don't know why they did this. If you remove this part of the back plate here so that this is open, hot air can pass directly through the heatsink and it will lower the temperature of the card by about 7 degrees C. It probably would lower the temperature of the card even more, but the heat pipes have to get from here, which is where the heat is produced, all the way over here. At the default noise profile, this card is very good. It's very quiet. At the base profile, you'll barely hear the fans ramp up, even in extreme 4K gaming. Even in an endless cycle of benchmarking with Firestrike, the noise level is pretty good, and I've got a recording of that. This is the same card under load. Slightly louder, but really not too much more loud. I had the fractal case open, so we've got 3 fans in the front and a fan in the back, and the fan noise from this card was almost, not quite, indistinguishable from all of the rest of the fan noise in the entire rest of the system. In terms of performance, it is within 1 FPS of the reference version. Well, this is not really the reference version, the Founders version, I guess, of the 3090. I'm always, I'm not sure NVIDIA, like what to call that exactly. So in terms of performance, you're not really gaining anything, you're not really losing anything. The thermals are a little bit better on this design. I mean, this design in terms of mass is like heavier than the Zotac. This is a lighter design. This card doesn't feel quite as insane. You still need a reinforced slot. It's still a really long card, so you're gonna have to double check your case clearance issues with the length of this card. For example, it's problematic in the Meshify, the Fractal Meshify C, if you have a water cooler in the front, an AIO, something like that, even one of the really thin AIOs, or even if you have thick fans in the front, this will sort of dig into them because it's that long. But you can make it work. It's just really close. Your tolerance is there. Versus this, you can see that this card is just a hair shorter. But that, 5 millimeters, 3 millimeters makes kind of the difference there. In terms of overclocking performance, this card was pretty satisfactory. I was able to overclock it to, around 2050 megahertz core clock and not experience any game crashing or anything like that. Didn't really, that was my max boost, but I'd also had it locked in such that It was basically 2050 across the board. I can say that your memory is going to make a bigger difference in FPS variance than, you know, this card versus, say, you know, the NVIDIA version of the 3090. Yeah, seriously. So I've got Ripjaw's, you know, DDR4 Ripjaw's G-Skill memory. This is CL17 DDR4 4000. This is the 16 gigs times 2, so this is a dual rank kit, versus the Trident Z Neo F4 3600 C14. So this is 14, 15, 15, 35, 1.45 volts. This memory makes a bigger difference, like switching between these two kits of memory. 3600, which is slower than 4000, is actually faster in games by up to 8 FPS at 1080p. Yeah, that makes a bigger difference than variations in different versions of the 3090. So obsessing about a frame or two on the 3090, not really a big deal. Although if it wouldn't void your warranty, I would recommend doing something about this backplane, but you have to completely disassemble the card, which involves messing with the thermal paste, and I just would not recommend that for newbie users. But overall, other than that, it's a pretty solid card. The display output port configuration is exactly the same as the NVIDIA version of the card. 3 DisplayPort 1 HDMI, HDMI 2.1, although it's a little difficult to find HDMI 2.1 TVs. I'm working on that. I'm kind of trying to get my hands on one of the LG OLED TVs to do some testing. And also, if you know of a good, attainable, preferably not over $1,000 HDMI 2.1 display that actually supports variable refresh rate and like 120 hertz refresh rate, you know, FreeSync, and 120 hertz, let me know in the comments below, especially if you have one. Like, don't just point out a listing on Amazon. I want you to actually have it and have experience with it. You don't have to be using the HDMI 2.1 port, but you at least need to tell me a little bit about the monitor in the description. One other thing I'll point out about this card, it's got dual 8-pin. This is a standard power connection. You may be paranoid that, oh, I'm gonna get one of the new cards and it's not gonna come with what I need. No, it comes with a power adapter so that you can go from the old 6-pin to the 8-pin, but this is standard issue 8-pin power. It doesn't use the new micro 12-pin connector that's on the reference regular NVIDIA RTX 3090, which I think is great. And before I forget, here are those gaming benchmarks. As you can see, this card stacks up really shockingly well. It is amazing how much farther ahead Ampere is over the 2080 Ti. The game performance here is just phenomenal in title after title after title after title. I'm not even getting into DLSS. I mean, DLSS really could be its own video, and there actually already are a lot of videos on DLSS you should check out because it is a genuinely very interesting technology. It's kind of cheating because it runs at lower resolution and upscales it, but it's like the best kind of cheating because the visual fidelity is actually very good. I'm really anxious to see what happens in the marketplace, and you know, in terms of like other similar technologies that might appear, because DLSS is genuinely a very good, surprisingly good for what it actually is. And the game performance here is just mind-blowing, even up through 4K. Now, I would expect that for things that run at 90 FPS at 4K to run at like 300 FPS plus at 1080p. We don't see that kind of scaling with Ampere for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to get into in this video, but nonetheless, these results are very interesting for a 3090. And spot checking this performance against the RTX 3080, well, you know, in a lot of games don't really care about that 24 gigs of VRAM. The 3090 is not dramatically faster than 3080, even up through 4K. It does enable things like 8K gaming, and then you can downscale the 8K to 4K, but I don't think anybody actually is doing that. Still though, the overall performance here, if you're looking for 144 hertz at 1440p or 144 hertz at ultra wide gaming, or, you know, 60 to 90 hertz at 4K, this card can do it. You might have to turn some settings down just a little bit, but this is truly the first generation of cards where I would say that 4K gaming really is actually within reason on this card. It's sort of nuts. Overall, Zotac has put together a competent card. I'm very impressed that Zotac is able to, you know, sell the 3080 and the 3090 for what they sell it for and still actually make a profit, because GDDR6X is pretty expensive from what I understand. The price point here definitely, you know, is amazing over the previous generation. I mean, I was paying $1,200 or $1,300 for 2080 Ti's, the ones, you know, from past reviews, and you know, $300 more for this much more performance. It's a really good deal. And then you consider other cards in the market, and it's like, well, you know, the 3080 is darn close to the 3090. Do I really need 24 gigs of VRAM? I mean, 10 gigs of VRAM seems like enough for most games. Do I really need 24 gigs of VRAM? And the answer is no. No, you mostly you don't need 24 gigs of VRAM. And when you do, it would be useful to have that more optimized driver path. And now you don't. So why are you buying 24 gigs of VRAM? I mean, is it 8K gaming? Maybe. DLSS is a really good technology. RTX voice is pretty good. It's been shown that RTX voice doesn't actually need RTX cores. You can run it on other GPUs. But we won't talk about that because that's another thing that puts you on the naughty list. Oh! Okay, so if you like this kind of review, let me know. Leave a comment below. I'm Wendell. This is Level 1. Thanks to our supporters for making this possible. Linux support on this. There's been a lot of interest in GPU support on the Linux channel. So I'm taking this thing for a test drive on Linux as well. Be on the lookout for that video. I can already tell you the out-of-the-box experience with these cards on Linux is pretty good. You've got to download a proprietary driver from NVIDIA, and whenever there are updates for your distro, it is an opportunity for things to become broken, such that you may have to fix things from the command line. Such is life with a proprietary driver. However, NVIDIA has done a good job putting the driver together and packaging it for most popular distros. Manjaro, which I wouldn't classify necessarily as a popular distro, has done a particularly good job of packaging that binary distribution from NVIDIA in a way that works for their distro, in a way that I'm sure that NVIDIA has not gone out of their way to specifically support Manjaro. So all of that is on the people that run Manjaro and, by extension, Arch Linux on supporting that. But overall, I'm surprised at how good the experience is on Linux for gaming with the 3000 series cards, even despite or with a proprietary driver. It has improved dramatically from the 10 series NVIDIA GPUs. I clocked a lot of miles with like the 1080 and the 1080 Ti on Linux, and there were some really annoying edge cases. Some of those edge cases actually ended up being fixed by a firmware update from NVIDIA like 6 months after the fact, but that's another thing I could rant on for like an hour or two. Things are much improved with the 3000 series. That's what you need to know. Be on the lookout for that video. I'm Wendell. This is Level 1. I'm signing out. I'll catch you later.